Hey, it's Marla here. My family humiliated me for running a cafe, calling it a waste of time. But little did they know, I secretly owned their biggest client, a $500 million account they'd been working on for years. Can you imagine how they reacted when they found out? It wasn't just about the money, it was about everything they took from me, every insult they threw my way, and how I kept quiet all along. But what would you do if your own family betrayed you? Ever had someone doubt you for something they didn't understand? Drop a comment below. I really want to know where you're watching from and what's your take on this. Let's talk. I couldn't help but fidget with the edge of my napkin as the chatter around the table in Grandma's house swirled like a slow whirlpool. It was Christmas Eve, and despite the soft glow of the tree lights and the familiar scent of roast turkey in the air, an invisible weight pressed on my chest. The house felt cold despite the warmth of the fire crackling in the hearth. I glanced around the table at my family. My cousin Olivia sat across from me, her eyes sparkling with a smugness I knew all too well. She had always been the golden child in our family. Perfect grades, a job at the family business, and now, apparently, a big promotion. Everyone adored her. My grandparents, my uncle, even Trista. Everyone praised Olivia's achievements. Meanwhile, I was the black sheep, the one who'd left the family business to open a cafe in a small town. Not exactly the picture of success they had hoped for. I forced a smile as Grandma set down the mashed potatoes in front of me. "How's your cafe doing, Marla?" Olivia asked, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. I felt my face flush. She wasn't really asking. She was mocking me. She always did it, subtly reminding me of my so-called failure while basking in the glory of her corporate job. "It's doing great, thanks for asking," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The anger inside me was like a storm building, but I kept it in check. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me squirm. Olivia smiled sweetly and continued, "Well, I've just been promoted to regional manager at the company. It's funny. Sometimes I think about how people's lives take such different paths, don't you?" The silence that followed was thick with judgment, though none of them would outright say it. My family's reactions were all the same. They showered Olivia with praise, their eyes glittering with admiration, while I sat there, feeling like an imposter in my own family. I could hear their thoughts. "She's just running a cafe. It's not a real business." I gripped my fork tightly, trying not to let my frustration show. I wanted to defend myself, to remind them of everything I had accomplished in the past few years, but instead I stayed quiet, staring down at my plate. I'd gotten used to being underestimated by them. And yet, deep down, I knew I had something none of them could see, something that, one day, they'd have no choice but to acknowledge. Gregory, my uncle, leaned forward with his usual air of condescension. "You know, Marla," he began, "if you ever get tired of running that cafe, we could always find a spot for you at the family business. Something more stable." I blinked, surprised, but I didn't let it show. He was offering me a sales assistant job, an insult disguised as an opportunity. I could almost hear the unspoken words, "You'll never make it on your own. Come back to the fold." "No, thank you," I replied, a cold smile playing on my lips. "I'm happy with what I'm doing." I didn't feel the need to elaborate. I wasn't desperate for their approval, especially not Gregory's. The table grew quiet, the tension palpable. Olivia's eyes flicked to me, her lips curling into a smirk. I could feel the weight of their disappointment, but I didn't let it shake me. The truth was, I was making more money in a month than she did in an entire year, money that I had earned quietly, without anyone knowing. My mind wandered briefly to the upcoming meeting with investors, and I couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. They didn't know it, but I was on the verge of something much bigger than a cafe. One day, I'd make them all see. Later that night, after the dinner had ended and the family had dispersed into different rooms, I sat by the window, staring out at the snow-covered Vermont hills. The house was too quiet. The mocking words from dinner still echoed in my mind, and I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface. I didn't flinch at the thought of their dismissive glances. What they didn't know was that the cafe they mocked was just the beginning. I owned the land it sat on, and a lot more. A whole network of properties that I had carefully built up over the years. I wasn't struggling. I wasn't failing. The reality was, my success dwarfed theirs. But they couldn't see that. They still thought I was just the girl who had been too stubborn to stay in the family business. To them, Olivia was the successful one. They couldn't fathom that I had quietly, without fanfare, created an empire of my own. As I stood there, looking out into the night, my resolve hardened. I wasn't going to let them keep me in their box, not anymore. It was time for them to see me for who I really was, and I was going to make sure that day came soon. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the world outside my office window was already bathed in a quiet early morning glow. I sat alone, surrounded by piles of paperwork, my cafe bustling in the background as my thoughts drifted back to the family dinner the night before. The echoes of Olivia's smug words and the weight of her condescending smile lingered in the back of my mind. I could feel the sting of their judgment deep in my chest. But I wasn't going to let them get to me. Not anymore. I had bigger plans now, plans that none of them could see coming. I took a deep breath, pushing my frustration aside and focused on the task at hand. But as my eyes scanned the documents in front of me, the anger from last night flared again. The words they'd thrown at me, their patronizing glances, everything felt like a slow burn in my veins. How could they not see? How could they not understand the level of success I had quietly built? I wasn't just running a cafe. I was playing a game they didn't even know existed. I shook my head, trying to push the feelings aside. I wasn't about to let them control my thoughts. I had worked too hard for everything I had. It was time to turn the tables. I barely heard the knock at the door. When Olivia stepped inside, I didn't bother to hide the irritation on my face. She stood there with that ever-present smugness, as if she owned the room. Her eyes flickered around the office, sizing everything up, no doubt taking in the fact that I wasn't just a failure anymore. But I knew what she was really after. "Must be nice to have your own office," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Not everyone can land such a lucrative gig." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "What do you want, Olivia?" She smiled, the kind of smile that felt like a dare. "Oh, I just wanted to check in. Make sure your cafe's still running smoothly. I heard it's been a bit of a struggle." My blood boiled at the implication. It had always been like this with her, picking at me, just enough to remind me of my place. She might have been the golden child, but I was no longer playing the role of the underdog. I had worked too damn hard. "Everything's going just fine," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "But thanks for your concern." Olivia's gaze sharpened, and I saw the shift in her demeanor. She wasn't just making small talk anymore. She was fishing. "I did some digging around, Marla. It's funny, isn't it? How things come full circle. You used to work for the family insurance business, didn't you?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. I froze. The mention of the family business felt like a slap across the face. Olivia was trying to remind me of my past, of the time when I was dismissed as a failure. "Is that so?" I said, keeping my tone casual despite the storm brewing inside me. Her eyes gleamed with curiosity, like she had uncovered some hidden treasure. "I found some interesting things about your so-called failed business venture. Funny how you never mentioned the trouble you had back then. All those years of fighting to keep things afloat, only for it to crumble." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt the weight of her judgment like a slap. She was digging into my past, taking pleasure in the pain I had worked so hard to overcome. "I don't need to explain myself to you, Olivia," I said, standing up and walking toward the window. My back was turned to her, but I could feel her eyes boring into me. "You wouldn't understand." The silence between us grew thick, but Olivia wasn't done yet. "I'm just trying to understand how things went so wrong for you, and how you managed to scrape by all these years without anyone knowing about the real you." I turned to face her, my eyes narrowing. "And what exactly are you trying to say?" She smirked, her voice dropping to a low, almost conspiratorial whisper. "I found your old business plans, Marla. your contracts, your investments, everything you've hidden from the family. You didn't fail. You lied. You've been playing a game, and now I think I understand it. You're not just running a cafe, you've been building something much bigger. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Olivia's realization was too much to ignore. She knew about the real estate empire I had built in secret. She knew everything, and I knew this would change everything between us. But I wasn't ready to show her just how much I had achieved. Not yet. Gregory's voice cut through my thoughts as he walked into the room, his presence almost as suffocating as Olivia's. "Marla," he began, his voice dripping with concern, "Olivia's been looking into your business. She's found out about some of your deals." My heart raced. My pulse quickened as I realized just how much danger I was in. Olivia wasn't just prying for the sake of curiosity. She was scheming. Plo. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of my office, casting long shadows across the room. I could feel the tension in the air, the kind that made your skin prickle, like a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. The cafe hummed in the background, but inside me, everything was still. My mind replayed the last few days, everything that had happened since that disastrous family dinner. Olivia's digs, Gregory's carefully veiled concern, and the way my family had treated me like a failure. It all kept swirling, refusing to settle. I had known my family didn't truly understand me. But this was different. Olivia's investigation, Gregory's quiet warnings, it felt like my world was beginning to unravel piece by piece. My cafe, my empire, everything I'd worked for was being picked apart, and I was the last to know. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but beneath that, there was something else, something cold and unrelenting. They had no idea what I was capable of. They thought they had me figured out, but they didn't know what I'd been hiding all these years. The real me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. When I opened them, I could see Gregory and Rochelle standing at the door, their faces unreadable. I gestured for them to come in, my expression firm, though inside, my pulse quickened. Gregory was the first to speak, his voice laced with disbelief. "Marla, we had no idea what you were really doing." He paused, clearly struggling to process the information. "This empire of yours, it's massive." Rochelle stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "You've been playing us all along, haven't you?" I didn't respond immediately. The shock on their faces was enough for me to know they were trying to digest the truth. For so long, I'd been the underdog in their eyes, the family member who couldn't get it together, the one they could write off. But now I had the power and they were scared. "You're right," I said finally, my voice steady. "You didn't know. But I've been building this quietly, and now you're seeing it for what it really is." My eyes flicked from Gregory to Rochelle. "You both should have known better than to underestimate me." Gregory's brow furrowed. "We didn't know what we were dealing with, Marla. We thought you were—" "A failure?" I interrupted, my voice rising just a little. "I don't need your pity. I've been successful, and you've been too blind to see it. All those years, I built something solid, something you'll never understand." Rochelle's face tightened. "You think you can just walk in here and take control? Do you think you can just—" I took a step toward them, my gaze sharp. "What I think, Rochelle, is that you and Gregory have been playing your games for far too long, and now it's my turn to play." The tension in the room thickened, and for a moment no one spoke. Gregory looked at me, his eyes betraying a mixture of awe and frustration. "We never saw it coming, Marla," he finally admitted. "But now, things are different. We need to talk." I shook my head, anger flaring inside me. "You want to talk? Then let's talk. But not about your plans to take control of my life. Let's talk about what you've been hiding from me all along." As the conversation continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that my family was trying to pull me into their web once again. They saw my success, my quiet power, as something to exploit, but I wasn't going to fall for it. Not this time. Not ever again. Olivia's face flashed in my mind. The way she'd smiled during that dinner, all smugness and superiority. I could still hear her words laced with judgment as she subtly mocked my business, comparing it to her so-called real career. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had something they couldn't touch. And it was mine. All mine. Later that evening, I found myself pacing in my office, my thoughts racing. The family had no idea how close they were to losing everything. They were on the edge, clinging to a facade that was about to collapse. My family's dependence on me was their biggest mistake. The door to my office creaked open, and I looked up to see Olivia standing there. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. "You're making a mistake, Marla," she said, her voice low. "You're playing a dangerous game." I crossed my arms, standing tall. "Maybe it's a game you've never understood." Olivia's eyes narrowed. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You're not as untouchable as you think." I leaned forward slightly, my voice cool. "I'm the one who holds the cards now, Olivia. You and the rest of them are just pawns in a game you didn't even know you were playing." Her silence spoke volumes. I knew what I had to do, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. The phone rang, interrupting my thought. The dinner table was set with the usual holiday cheer, but the tension hanging in the air could have suffocated anyone. The room was filled with the clinking of silverware, half-hearted laughter, and the clatter of glasses, but I barely heard any of it. All I could focus on was the weight of the lies that had been laid bare in front of me. Olivia sat across from me, her smugness nearly unbearable, but I held my ground. The sharp taste of betrayal still lingered in my mouth, and with every bite of food, I could feel my anger simmering just below the surface. They thought they knew everything about me, but none of them had the slightest clue. Olivia was the first to speak, of course, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "So, how's the cafe business, Marla?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with that all-too-familiar condescension. "Still making ends meet?" I set my fork down slowly, meeting her gaze with a calmness I didn't quite feel. "It's doing well, Olivia, surprisingly well." The room fell into a tense silence. I could feel the eyes of my family on me, waiting for me to back down, to explain myself, but I didn't. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me struggle. Olivia's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Well, I'm glad for you," she said, though it was clear she didn't mean it. "I'm sure it's nothing compared to what I've been doing, though." She let that hang in the air, a thinly veiled jab at my so-called failure. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming on the edge of the table. "I'm not concerned with your career, Olivia," I said, my voice even, "but thanks for asking." I could feel the rush of heat behind my eyes, a combination of anger and frustration, but I held it together. There was no need to stoop to her level, not yet. But it wasn't easy. The family's mockery, their disdain, was starting to chip away at the patience I'd carefully cultivated for years. "Marla's always been the black sheep," Gregory piped up from his seat at the head of the table, his voice like sandpaper. "She never really had a clue, did she?" His words, though masked as a joke, cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I was no longer the woman they could dismiss, the one they could ridicule without consequence. I was stronger now, in ways they couldn't even begin to understand. "Actually, Gregory," I said, my voice low and controlled, "I've been playing a game you haven't even known existed." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, but I didn't wait for a response. I wasn't going to explain myself to them any longer. They were too far gone, lost in their own delusions. As dinner wore on, the conversation grew more strained. Olivia's passive-aggressive remarks grew sharper, but I was done taking the bait. I had to stop myself from smiling too widely when I thought about the secret I'd kept hidden for so long. When everyone had left the table, I stayed behind, lingering in the empty space. The house felt too quiet, the silence loud in my ears. My mind raced with everything that had happened, all the secrets they'd tried to bury, all the lies they'd spun. I thought about the family business, the empire they were all so proud of, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction. They had no idea what was coming, and I was going to make sure they never did. It didn't take long for things to escalate. By the time I returned to my office the next morning, I had confirmation of what I already suspected. Gregory and Rochelle, working together behind my back, were making moves to strip me of control over my assets. They had been trying to manipulate my partners, trying to convince them to align with them instead of me. They thought I wouldn't notice, but I always did. The anger surged through me, hot and unforgiving. But underneath that anger, there was a deep well of resolve. They weren't going to win this. Not now. Not ever. I met Gregory's eyes when he walked into my office, his usual smug grin wiped clean from his face. "We need to talk," he said. "Talk?" I echoed, standing to face him. "I think you've said enough already." He faltered for a moment before trying to recover. "Look, we didn't mean for it to go this far, Marla. But we're family. We want what's best for you." "You don't get to pretend you want what's best for me," I shot back, my voice cold. "What you want is control. You always have, but not anymore." The realization hit him, hard. The family had been controlling me for so long, believing they could shape me into whatever they wanted me to be. But now the tables had turned. I had the power, and I wasn't afraid to use it. As the days passed, the family's desperation grew. They knew they were losing their hold over me, and the cracks in their facade were starting to show. I could see it in Olivia's eyes, the frustration in Gregory's voice, and the silent fury from Trista. But it didn't matter. I was ready for them. I sat in the quiet of my office, the weight of the family dinner still heavy on my mind. My hands were stiff, gripping the paperwork in front of me as if holding on to something solid in a world that had just shifted beneath my feet. The conversations, the biting remarks, Olivia's voice echoing in my mind with its unmistakable smugness, still reverberated through me. The betrayal wasn't just something I had to accept anymore. It was real. It was tangible. It was the heart of everything they had done. The lies, the manipulation, the assumption that I'd always be the small, quiet Marla that they could easily dismiss. It all felt suffocating. I ran my fingers across the desk, the reality of the situation settling in. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was about survival. I had to act, and I had to act now. A message flashed across my phone screen, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was from Gregory. His message was blunt. "The family's in trouble. We need to talk." I didn't need to read any further to know what he meant. The family was spiraling, and they were going to try to use me as their lifeline once again, but not this time. I was done being their scapegoat. The family's financial ruin had been a long time coming, but it seemed they had finally hit the tipping point. Their debts were piling up, and with every passing day they were sinking further into a hole they could no longer climb out of. Their once thriving insurance business was on the verge of collapse, their reputation tarnished. And through all of this, they still had the audacity to point the finger at me. They blamed me for their failures. They resented the fact that I had built something they couldn't understand, something they would never be able to control. My success, my quiet, humble cafe, had become their symbol of failure. I was their reminder of how far they had fallen. But instead of admitting their mistakes, they chose to lash out. "Marla," Olivia had sneered at me over dinner, her voice thick with disdain. "It's really nice that you have a cafe, but I think you've lost sight of what real success looks like." The irony of her words hit me like a slap to the face. She had no idea. No idea how far I'd come, how much I'd sacrificed to get here. She thought she knew me, but all she saw was a business I'd started from scratch, a cafe that was nothing compared to the empire she thought she was building. And yet, despite all of this, I felt a sick, bitter laugh bubble up inside of me. They were sinking, and I was rising. I didn't waste time with their blame game. I kept my composure as the accusations piled up, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Each word that left their mouths, each demand they made, only served to fuel the fire inside me. They had no idea what was coming. The moment came when I finally sat them down. Olivia, Gregory, and Trista, all gathered in the same room. I could see the nervousness in their eyes, the tension that had been building over the past few days. They knew what was coming. They knew I had the power to expose everything. I took a deep breath and, with a calm that belied the storm inside me, I began. "You've all been so eager to make me the villain in your story," I said, my voice steady but sharp. "But the truth is, I've been the one holding everything together, all while you've been trying to tear me down." Gregory's face twitched. "What are you talking about, Marla?" he asked, his voice suddenly defensive. I smirked. "You think I'm still the girl you can control, the one who has no real power? But I'm the one who owns the land your precious business sits on. I'm the one who's been quietly building something that could obliterate everything you've worked for. And now, it's too late. You've pushed me too far." The room fell silent. Gregory's face drained of color, and I could see the panic starting to creep into his eyes. Trista, too, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. They had no idea what to say, no idea how to fight back. For the first time in my life, I felt the power shift in my favor. I wasn't just a businesswoman anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. Later that night, as I stood in front of the mirror, the reality of what I'd done began to sink in. They had tried to tear me apart for so long, to make me feel insignificant, to make me feel small. But I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't weak. I had my own empire now, and it was time for them to see just how far I had come. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me anymore. I had control, and I wasn't giving it up. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up without hesitation. It was an anonymous message. "You've made your move, but the worst is yet to come." A chill ran down my spine. The consequences of my actions were just beginning to unfold, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down now. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. I had no other choice. I leaned back in my chair, the quiet hum of the office the only sound around me. The weight of the day's decisions still pressed down on me. My mind raced, again and again, the words from the last few days echoing in my thoughts. I hadn't been wrong about my family. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a calculated attempt to control everything I had built. But now, there was something else stirring inside me, a sense of clarity, a plan slowly taking shape. The phone buzzed on my desk, pulling me out of my reverie. It was an unfamiliar number. Hesitant, I answered it. "Marla, it's Trista," the voice on the other end said, smoother than usual. "I've been thinking. I want to work with you. There's more to what you've built than just your cafe. Together, we can expand your influence, make your empire something far bigger than what it is now." I stifled a laugh, my fingers tightening around the receiver. Trista, of all people, was suddenly offering her help. She'd been the one who undermined me, the one who'd always seen me as a stepping stone for her own ambitions. But now she wanted to play nice? I wasn't buying it. "I'm listening," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "I'm serious, Marla," Trista continued. "I've seen your potential. If we join forces, we could outgrow everything, even the family business." My heart skipped. I knew exactly what this was. She wasn't offering a partnership out of the goodness of her heart. She saw my success as something she could manipulate, something she could control. I'd been a fool once, but I wouldn't fall for this again. "I appreciate the offer," I said slowly. "But I don't need anyone else to build what I've already started. I'm capable of handling things on my own." There was a brief silence on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind. She wasn't used to being turned down. "I see," she finally said, her voice colder. "Well, think about it, Marla. You don't want to regret this." I ended the call, my mind swirling. Trista was still playing the same game, but now I knew better. She wasn't the ally she was pretending to be. She wanted in on my success, but I wasn't about to let her use me as a pawn again. Not this time. A few hours later, I sat in the dim light of my office, reflecting on how far I had come. It was hard to admit, but the truth was undeniable. I had learned. I had learned how to build something from nothing, how to trust my instincts. And above all, I had learned that I didn't need anyone to tell me what I was worth. But as much as I had grown, a lingering sadness wrapped around my chest. Trista had once been a friend. It stung to know that she had always viewed me as a tool for her own gains. But that was the past, and I couldn't let it pull me down. I was no longer the girl she had tried to manipulate. The door to my office creaked open, and Gregory stepped inside, his face tense. "Marla," he began, his voice low, "you need to understand something. The family's not happy with you. You've crossed a line. You're taking everything too far." I raised an eyebrow, watching him closely. He was trying to intimidate me, to make me feel small again. It wasn't going to work. "I'm not interested in your threats, Gregory," I said, my voice unwavering. "You and the rest of the family made your choice when you decided to turn against me. I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself." Gregory's eyes narrowed. "You think you can take us all down? You think you're stronger than us?" "I don't need to take anyone down," I replied coolly. "You've done that yourself. All I'm doing is standing in the light you tried to keep me out of." There was a beat of silence before Gregory spoke again. "You'll regret this, Marla. You can't walk away from the family like this." I smiled tightly. "I've already walked away, Gregory, and it feels better than I ever imagined." The next day, the family's reaction came as I expected. They had begun to fight back, spreading rumors about me to anyone who would listen. They couldn't stomach the idea that I had succeeded without them. They wanted to tear me down, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I decided it was time to make the first real move. The truth was mine to control now. I took a deep breath and prepared to show my family exactly what they had underestimated. I released a statement about my success, my holdings, my empire, everything they had no idea I'd built. The family's financial failures, their negligence, the secrets they'd kept, all of it came to light. It was time for them to see the full scope of their mistakes. They had made me the villain in their story, but now I was the one writing the narrative. The fallout was immediate. News outlets picked up the story. My family's shame was splashed across the media, their financial troubles exposed for everyone to see. They couldn't hide anymore. But as I celebrated my victory, a message popped. The dim light of the office cast long shadows as I sat at my desk, staring at the papers in front of me. I had always been the kind of person who kept working until there was no choice but to face the reality of my life. And today, reality was impossible to ignore. The phone buzzed on the desk, breaking the silence. It was Olivia's name on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Marla," she started, her tone all too familiar, half apologetic, half patronizing. "I think we need to talk." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Talk about what?" "Look," she continued, her voice soft but the underlying tension clear. "Things have gone too far. I've been thinking about it, and maybe we've been wrong." I couldn't suppress the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "You've been wrong? You've been making my life a living hell, Olivia. And now you want to talk about it?" She sighed, a pause hanging in the air. "I know things haven't been great. I was wrong to treat you the way I did." I shook my head, the anger bubbling to the surface, but I stayed calm. "You know what, Olivia? It's too late for apologies. Too late for any of this." I hung up before she could respond, the sound of the phone disconnecting echoing through the room. I needed to focus. This wasn't over. It was far from over. The following week was a whirlwind. News of my family's financial struggles spread quickly, and the whispers began. My name was dragged through the mud, accusations flying faster than I could keep up with. But none of it fazed me. I had worked too hard, and I wasn't about to let them take away everything I'd built. I sat in my office, going over the latest set of documents. Gregory had tried to reach out, trying to convince me that things could be worked out between us. He wanted me to join forces with him, to repair the family's business. But the last few months had shown me everything I needed to know about my family. They had used me. They had manipulated me for years, and now they were trying to salvage their sinking ship at my expense. I wasn't about to let that happen. Olivia's words still rang in my ears. "Maybe we've been wrong," she had said. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. There was no sincerity in her apology. None. She had spent years belittling my hard work, tearing me down at every opportunity. And now, when the reality of my success hit her, she thought an apology would fix everything. I could feel my grip tightening on the papers in front of me. It wasn't just the family that needed to be taken down. It was the narrative they had created about me. The narrative of a failure, a woman who couldn't make it on her own. I was done with that. By the time Trista showed up at my office, I had made up my mind. Her expression was a mix of curiosity and caution, but I could see the gears turning in her mind. She had always been the type to exploit opportunities, and she saw mine as something she could take advantage of. "Marla," she started, her voice more hesitant than I'd ever heard it. "I've been thinking. We could really make something big together. I can help you expand. We could be unstoppable." I looked her dead in the eye, my tone steady. "You think I need your help?" Trista faltered, but quickly recovered. "I'm just saying we could—" I cut her off. "You don't get it, do you? I don't need anyone's help, least of all yours." Her face fell, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. Trista had always seen me as a means to an end, and now that I was stronger, she wanted to hitch her wagon to my success. But I wasn't falling for it. "I've been building this empire on my own, Trista," I said, my voice cold. "You don't get to take credit for it now." Later that evening, after another series of confrontations, the final betrayal came. I was sitting at my desk, going through the latest financial reports, when I got a call from my lawyer. My family had hired a powerful legal team. They were making a final attempt to seize my assets. I couldn't help but smile. They had underestimated me from the start. I hung up the phone, my thoughts crystallizing into a single, undeniable truth. This was it. The battle for everything I had worked for was about to reach its breaking point, and I was ready. The news spread like wildfire. The public exposure of the family's financial ruin sent shockwaves through their business, and their reputation crumbled. But the most shocking revelation came when I publicly exposed their failings. They had manipulated their own clients, lying and cheating to maintain the appearance of success. I was done. I was no longer the victim. I had no intention of playing their game anymore. But just as I started to feel a sense of peace, my phone buzzed again. A new message, this one from an anonymous source. The words were simple but chilling. "This isn't over, Marla. They're coming for you. Prepare yourself. Emmy." The weight of the decisions I had made so far was pressing down on me. The office felt colder than usual, the silence more oppressive. My mind raced through the events of the last few weeks, each confrontation leaving its mark, but none heavier than the one I knew was coming. I had fought tooth and nail for everything I had, but the question lingered. Would I have to lose everything else to finally be free? I looked at the clock on the wall. It was late, but sleep had long since fled my mind. The quiet hum of the cafe outside my office window was a reminder that the world kept spinning, but I felt as though mine was slowly coming to a halt. I stood up, pacing the room. Every step felt like I was walking on a razor's edge. I had given my family a chance to correct their mistakes, but they had thrown it all away. Now, all that was left was the inevitable confrontation. The storm was coming, and I had no choice but to face it head-on. Days passed in a blur. I was awake early every morning, buried in work and fighting the lingering sense of dread that my family's final betrayal was looming closer. It came sooner than expected. The notification arrived in the middle of another long day, my inbox pinging with the latest threat. An aggressive legal team had been hired by my family. The subject line was simple, direct. Legal action. They were suing me for control of the cafe, of everything I had worked for, their last-ditch effort to take back what they'd lost. But it didn't stop there. They had launched a full-blown media campaign, painting me as a fraud and a liar. They accused me of everything from manipulation to dishonesty, all the while conveniently forgetting their own involvement in the mess. It was as if they had decided to burn the bridge completely, with me still standing in the middle of the fire. I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I had already been preparing for something like this. I called my lawyer, told him to gather our defense team. It was time to take the fight to them, once and for all. The court battle was unlike anything I had imagined. The tension was palpable as we sat in that sterile room, surrounded by the coldness of the legal world. The opposing counsel made their arguments with practiced ease, trying to tear apart everything I had built. But I was prepared. I laid out the facts, exposing the financial mismanagement my family had hidden for years. My success wasn't built on their backs. It was mine. Every success, every failure, it was all mine. And then, just when I thought I couldn't bear the weight of it any longer, Ellison Drake stepped in. His presence was a beacon of strength in the storm. With irrefutable evidence in hand, he tore apart my family's lies. They had underestimated him, too, and now, there was no way they could escape. Despite winning the case, there was no elation, no joy in proving them wrong. As the gavel slammed down and the room emptied, the reality of what I had done hit me. The final cost was much higher than I had anticipated. I had won, but I had lost my family. I would never be able to get back what I had once thought I could rebuild. Alone in my office after the trial, I allowed myself a moment of introspection. What had I done? I had fought for my freedom, for my success, but at what cost? The victory felt hollow. I had won everything I ever wanted, but the people I had once loved were lost to me forever. I thought of the years I spent trying to please them, trying to prove myself in their eyes. And now, nothing. There would be no happy reunion, no reconciliation, only emptiness. But there was also a sense of resolution. I wasn't going back. I couldn't. I had come too far, built too much to let their manipulations creep back into my life. I had to move on. And somehow, I would. But just as I began to find some semblance of peace, the phone rang again. It was the lawyer. My heart sank as I picked up. "They know," he said, his voice tight. "They've discovered something else. Something big." I felt the blood drain from my face. The family had learned the truth. They now knew that not only had I defeated them in court, but I also secretly owned their most valuable client. A $500 million account. The one they had been chasing for years. It was the final blow. My family, in their desperation, had pushed me to this point, but now they were faced with the full weight of their actions. The realization hit them hard, sending them into a panic. I couldn't help but feel a cold satisfaction. They had underestimated me every step of the way. Now they were paying the price, but I wasn't gloating, not really. I had never needed them to validate me. I had only ever needed the truth. And now the truth was out. But with the truth came more danger. The storm hadn't passed. It was just beginning. I couldn't let my guard down. Not now. The silence in my living room was deafening. The weight of everything that had unfolded over the past few weeks pressed on me like a heavy cloak, one that I couldn't shake off no matter how hard I tried. I had won the battle, but the war within me was far from over. The trial had been a victory, a final act of defiance against the family who had tried to control me, to manipulate me for years. But as I sat alone in the dimly lit room, a cold realization washed over me. The victory didn't feel like I expected it to. There was no satisfaction in proving them wrong, no joy in tearing apart the life I had once longed to be a part of. I had achieved everything I set out to do. The business was mine, the empire I built, untouchable. Yet what good was it if I had to lose the only people who should have stood by me? The following days blurred into one another as my family tried, in vain, to regain some semblance of power. I could hear the whispers even before the phone calls came. The news was everywhere, their humiliation complete. The revelation that I owned their biggest client, the $500 million account they'd been working on for years, had sent them into a panic. They never saw it coming. The backlash was swift. They tried to backpedal to pull together a final defense, but it was too late. The truth had come out, and with it, their arrogance had been completely shattered. I felt no pleasure in their collapse. There was a hollow space inside of me that their defeat couldn't fill. They had built their world on lies, on manipulation, and now they were paying the price. But I had already walked away from them long ago. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. They had pushed me to this point, and I had found my strength in the ashes of their betrayals. But the cost of my victory? It was far heavier than I could have anticipated. Alone in my office, I took a deep breath, letting the weight of everything wash over me. The quiet hum of the city outside my window was a stark contrast to the storm inside me. The journey had changed me. It had taken everything I had to get here, but at what price? I had fought for my independence, for my success, but I couldn't escape the loneliness that clung to me now. I thought back to all the moments when I had tried so hard to fit into the mold they wanted me to. The family dinners, the quiet criticisms, the subtle jabs that chipped away at my confidence. But somewhere along the way, I had stopped caring about their approval. I had learned that my worth wasn't defined by them. Yet, the emotional toll of severing those ties was more than I could bear some days. I had sacrificed relationships to gain my freedom, and now the weight of that sacrifice settled heavily in my chest. Was it worth it? Could it ever be? The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I wiped my eyes quickly, standing up to open the door. Ellison Drake was standing there, holding a bottle of wine. His presence was like a balm to my soul, calming me, even if only for a moment. "I thought you could use this," he said with a small smile, handing it to me. "Congratulations on your victory." I didn't know what to say. My lips parted, but no words came out. His eyes softened as he stepped into the room, looking around. "You've done it, Marla," he said, his voice gentle. "But I can see you're still carrying the weight of it all. You can't keep fighting alone. Let yourself breathe." I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I took the bottle from him, opening it slowly as my mind wandered to everything that had led me here. The legal battles, the betrayals, the painful realizations. I didn't want this. I didn't want any of it, I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. But I had no choice. Ellison nodded. "You did what you had to do, and now you're free. Free to decide what comes next. You've earned that." I closed my eyes for a moment, savoring the rare moment of peace. There was no going back. I couldn't undo what had been done. My family was gone, and no amount of regret would change that. But maybe it wasn't too late to find something better, to build the life I had always wanted, with people who truly cared. "I don't know what's next," I admitted, finally meeting his gaze. "But I know I'm ready for it, whatever it is." Ellison smiled warmly. "Then let's find out together." The weight of the past was still heavy on my heart, but as I sat there with Ellison, I felt something new stirring within me. It wasn't the hunger for revenge or the fear of loss. It was the quiet certainty that I could start again. The journey ahead was unwritten, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to write my own story. As I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, there's one thing I've learned through all the pain and triumph. Your success isn't measured by the approval of others, but by your ability to stay true to yourself, even when the world seems to be working against you. We often find ourselves in situations where family, friends, or society expect us to fit into certain molds. But the real strength lies in breaking free from those expectations and creating your own path. I could have easily given in, let their criticisms break me. But instead, I took the difficult road, one filled with challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt. And in the end, that's what made me stronger. For anyone out there who feels stuck, whether in a toxic relationship, an unsupportive family, or a job that doesn't fulfill you, remember this: you have the power to change your story. Don't let anyone tell you who you should be or where you belong. Take the reins of your life and drive it in the direction that feels right for you. What's your story? Have you ever felt like you had to choose between staying true to yourself and meeting others' expectations? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's keep this conversation going. Let me know where you're watching from, or if you didn't like the video, let me know why. Either way, I'm all ears. Stay tuned for more stories, and thank you for being part of this journey with me. Until next time.